Got it. So we are live in Universal Healing with Titta and Steven Kessler. We're gonna talk about the 5 personality patterns today. In Universal Healing, we in our intention to provide healing to the world, we are always talking and bringing themes that are really doing that, bringing healing to the wounding, to the patterns that we have that are not allowing us to feel really and to be and become who we really are. So thank you all for being here, and I'm going to pass it to Titta, that it's one of our partners in Universal Healing, and we are always working together. So Titta, you are in Finland, isn't it?
Yes, thank you, Manel. Yes, so for everybody, this is regards from the darkness, which is, it's night here in Finland. So thank you very much, Steven, for being here. It's amazing to have you as our guests, as our first guest of this conversational series that we are starting to do. So you are the author and the writer of this amazing book called The 5 Personality Patterns, Your Guide to Understanding Yourself and Others and Developing Emotional Maturity. I have to say that we, all the teachers, most of the teachers, and I think maybe all, are very big fan of your book because it's really bringing such an amazing aspect into the healing and understanding why it is so complicated sometimes to be in our own life and why relationships are so difficult. So in this book, you explain in detail how actually the conditioning happens and how we learn to limit ourselves and stop our shining, in all honesty. So how is it possible for us to come back into feeling free, flowing with all that freedom and all that amazingness that we have, and stop limiting ourselves? You have worked with hundreds of different people in different circumstances, so it's like we're really thrilled to have you here. So help us out here.
Yeah. Stephen, who are you? Yeah.
Pardon me?
Who are you?
Who am I?
Yes.
I'm a psychotherapist in the United States, in California. Have been a therapist for 40 years. I was an actor before that. So I've been sort of studying human behavior and human emotion and psychology most of my life. I first learned the Enneagram back in 1987 and was a huge fan of the Enneagram for 20 years. I studied it with Helen Palmer. She would teach it from life, from a panel of live people who do whatever Enneagram point we were learning about that evening. And I really learned the value of learning from life, from that. And I also studied the Enneagram as part of being a student in the Diamond Heart School, the Ridwan Spiritual School, which for my money is the best psycho-spiritual training out there, the best I've ever seen. And I haven't seen them all, but I think that one is really good. And then nearly 20 years ago, I was introduced to character structure as a different map of personality, as a different way of understanding people. And as I learned it, also from life, I began to realize that it's a more organic way of understanding people, that it arises out of what people actually do rather than sort of an outside filter being applied to it. The Enneagram, it uses the filter of the holy ideas, and the Myers-Briggs uses a couple of Jungian terms, but the character structure map is more organic in a certain way.
Mhm.
And as I experienced it in studying it and in seeing it in my clients and introducing my clients to it, I began to realize that that's a more easily accessible and actually a more accurate way of understanding what's going on with people. And gradually, you know, I was mostly just taking notes from the class that I was in, that I was studying, and over a period of years and years, I accumulated a lot of notes. And then I'm not really sure how it happened, but I sort of drifted into assembling those notes into a book. I sort of get the impression that, you know, the teachers in the unseen world had decided we need someone to put this into a book, and you look likely, Steven. So how about it? So, you know, it took about 8 years of work, but that's how the book on the 5 personality patterns was born.
Yeah, it's an impressive work. So yeah, that we all appreciate very much.
I've
But
been
it's
very happy with the reception it's received.
Mhm.
I've got many emails from many people around the world telling me that this book has changed their life, and without any real advertising, it's sold over 30,000 copies now. So that's really good for a self-published book.
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely, and it's a wonderful base for us teachers, because it has also different energetic exercises that can make really people to understand their own conditioning, because it's very difficult for people to understand their own conditioning. They will understand it on the others, on their boyfriends and on
Yes,
everybody
yes,
else, but then
yes.
actually to see yourself in the mirror and say, so, oh, really, am I really like this? You think that I have this leading pattern? So you talk about 5 different personality patterns: the leading pattern, the merging pattern, the enduring, the aggressive, and the rigid pattern. And so in this book, you are saying that we have one major and maybe then the secondary one. So how do we use these patterns in our lives and in our relationships?
Yeah, well, as you said, each of the patterns arises out of a safety strategy that we adopted as a child to try to feel safer in situations that we didn't feel safe enough in, situations where we felt overwhelmed. And, you know, it's natural and it's healthy for a person who's feeling overwhelmed to try to buffer themselves in some way from the overwhelm so that they can cope with the situation. And practicing any of these safety strategies over and over again, as you said, tends to condition it into the body. And I think one of the things that I was able to add, and this was a teaching that I received, but I hadn't seen it in any of the previously published books. One of the main things I was able to add was the idea that a person is not conditioned into only one pattern, but rather into 2. And some people actually have 3 different patterns. I haven't seen anyone who does 4 or 5 patterns.
Oh, really?
Yeah?
Well, from my perspective, and it's interesting, I think that it's like we use a kind of like a cocktail of different in different situations, but
if a
there is
person
the
is
major.
using a different strategy in a different situation, maybe it's not really deeply conditioned into their body. Maybe they're actually more present and they're able to choose a response that is actually more effective for this situation. So I wouldn't call that doing the pattern or being conditioned into the pattern.
Right.
I would call that being more centered, more present, and more able to respond appropriately.
Right. A very good point.
Also, when we grow up, I think we have a flavor in us
Mhm.
that we've been going through all the different patterns in our growing up, and then we adopt the ones that really fit us in a better way. That
Yes,
are more, yeah.
I think a parent who understands this map of personality, this way of understanding people, can probably watch each of their children try out each of the safety strategies. And of course, you know, the healthy and effective thing to do is repeat the safety strategies that work for you and discard the ones that don't.
Mhm.
And that's how we come to repeat our favorite couple of safety strategies so much that they get conditioned into our body.
Absolutely. And that shape our physical body.
Yes, that's an amazing factor, isn't it?
Mm.
How the safety strategy tends to distort the flow of our attention and our life energy. And then because wherever our life energy goes gets bigger, especially when when our body is growing, then you know the distorted flow of life energy tends to affect the way our bodies grow.
Absolutely.
So it creates a kind of typical body shape for each pattern, but it's not strict. There are many people who are caught in a particular pattern and their body is not typical to that.
Mhm.
I want to say that just because some people like to think of it as a strict one-to-one correspondence and use that as a way to try to discern what patterns people do. And I always want to direct them back to, no, look at the safety strategies the person uses. Look at where their attention habitually resides.
Mhm. Exactly. So there is a combination, there's a connection from with the survival strategies and with self-sabotage. So why and how do we sabotage ourselves in our relationship to ourselves and to others?
You know, I don't think of it so much as sabotaging ourselves. I think of it as something that appears to be a problem on the surface level is probably a solution to a deeper problem on a deeper level.
Mhm.
So the things that can ultimately be self-defeating are on a deeper level a way of protecting yourself. And I think that's most vividly illustrated with the enduring pattern, where the child learned that self-expression and self-action, and even just really showing up, was going to get them attacked. So they learned to not be there for an attack, to not show up on someone else's radar by not taking a position, not expressing themselves, not trying to take action. So that solution to the problem of constantly getting attacked as a child and being unable to win any of the fights, that solution then appears on the surface as a kind of self-sabotage.
Wow. So what you're saying is that self-sabotage is actually just a desperate attempt to try to not to feel that need that was never fulfilled.
Yeah, I would say that anything that shows up on the surface as self-sabotage is probably a way of solving a deeper problem. And in order to heal that or change that behavior, we need to get down to the deeper level and understand the deeper problem and find a better solution to that deeper problem.
Right. So how do we do that?
Well, that depends on the individual situation. You know, that's an individual solution. I don't know that there's a universal one.
Right.
But I think the first step is to be able to look at the problems and the solutions in terms of layers. For instance, a lot of people will say, well, so-and-so has a problem, they're an alcoholic, or they're addicted to some drug. And that's true on the surface. But the part that they may not be seeing is that the effect of the alcohol or the drug is to numb them so they don't feel a pain coming from deeper in their psyche. It's actually solving the problem of feeling some grief, some sadness, some loneliness, some despair, something that is too much for them to face. So the surface problem is a solution to a deeper problem. And in order for them to get out of the addictive pattern, we have to find the deeper wound that's causing this unhappiness that they then are medicating. We have to heal the deeper wound.
Yeah.
And to heal, just a moment, Titta, to heal the wound in the school, in Barbara Brenner's School of Healing, we always do exercises, even from your book, to guiding the students to meet that wound that we're talking about, that pain that was buried in early childhood.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that is very probably the beginning of the transformation, isn't it?
I think so. Finding and healing the core wounds in a person's psyche, I think, is the fundamentally transformative process in any kind of healing work. And I imagine that you folks have an amazing set of tools and skills for doing that.
Absolutely. Of course, the people who come to school, to the Barbara Brenner School of Healing, they already are wanting to do something about that. They're not feeling so good in themselves, and they know that there's a problem. In our society, most of the time, people actually get really sick, or they really get very addicted, or there's something, they have to really feel very, very bad before they start searching for any solution. They just keep going like an autopilot.
Yes.
And so
yes, they do.
that is very heartbreaking, and so we were talking before that this should be taught in every high school, and probably for every young parent this book should be there by their bedside. But how could we? Why is it that we have to go into such depth of suffering before we start helping ourselves?
I don't really know. I have the opinion, I can't prove this, my understanding of the question, like, why are we here? Why do we even exist? Why are we here on Earth? What is life about? My best guess about that is that in being just being in the cloud of divinity, being in the oneness where you can never be injured, that it's very hard to learn new things because you can't have new experiences. And the way that in a way that the divine can learn is to split off little bits of itself, bring those down into physical life, where we think we are, a separate individual, and where we can have experiences and make choices, and then experience the consequences of our choices. We can learn. I've been told by people who talk to angels, I don't have that talent, that the angels are actually jealous of us because we can learn and grow and they can't.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's true, but it shows me that there might be something really precious and valuable about human life. And that we have this amazing opportunity here to learn. Now, I also agree with you as we look around at humanity that it looks like most of us are sort of in the third grade. This is not exactly grad school. This is don't steal anything, don't hit anybody. You have to ask for what you want. You have to say please and thank you. We're learning the basics here. This is not a realm where we're all really, really advanced already. But this is where we are, and maybe it's an honorable place to be. So that's my guess.
Yeah,
And like I said, I don't have a big enough view to be sure it's true, but it's the best explanation I've heard.
yeah. It seems like you're saying that we are in a three-dimensional world, and I'm saying that because lately I'm hearing a lot, and I'm talking a lot as well about the fifth dimension that is supposed that we are moving to. And I don't know if in a space of more advanced consciousness as humans, if we're going to have still personality patterns. What do you think?
I don't have any way of measuring that or foreseeing that. I think it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Personality patterns, in my understanding, are part of our ego structure.
Mm-hmm.
And different people's egos are structured a little bit differently from each other. And, one of the main differences is what personality patterns did you develop? But if we posit people who are not just identified with their ego structure, who are more identified with their essence or their true self or their presence, or however you want to name that, maybe they wouldn't be caught in their patterns, or maybe they could just wear their patterns lightly. That would be lovely, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would, and also one thing that I have learned learning and teaching about these patterns all these years, it's that I went from that space, like many times when we are students, that we hate this pattern.
Yes.
I don't want to be oral or the merging pattern, to say something. And then in all this process of getting into it, feeling it, and all that, your book is very good with it. You develop compassion, a space of compassion, and even respecting that aspect of yourself and seeing that aspect in others, and even reaching that space of really opening your heart every time that you see that pattern being in the defensive mode. Because of course, in the book you talk as well of the gifts of the pattern, which is great, I think. So it's easier to go into that space. Yeah.
One of the things that I experienced as a young man when I was a stage actor is that everyone is doing the best they can. When I was an actor in plays, I was sometimes cast in roles where the person was a really cruel, mean person. And what I discovered was, in order to really play that part well, I had to understand where that was coming from. I had to go to the heart of that, which is usually some huge, deep wound that the person is trying to stay away from. And it taught me that judging people isn't really that helpful, that instead it's much more helpful to assume, well, they're doing the best they can. How can I help them do a little better? And maybe I need to protect myself from whatever they're doing, because, even if they're doing the best they can, maybe they're dangerous to me. But that understanding people and having compassion for people is actually more helpful and wise than just judging them. And believe me, when I was young, I was pretty good at judging people. I was pretty deep into that idea.
Yeah, that's actually, it's a wonderful key to me to talk about the inner critic. I did a
Yes.
little workshop yesterday about these 5 personality patterns based on your work, and it's really it's a wonderful. I should just like encourage everybody to do more of this work. And then after the workshop, I was like, okay, so I started to beat myself up. You know, I've done 12 years of work with myself, with Barbara Brennan, with your work, with everything else. So the inner critic who comes is like, it wasn't good, your flow wasn't good, this and that. So it's like, tell us a little bit more about the inner critic and how can we dampen this person in ourselves.
This was one of the biggest and most important things that I learned as a student in the Diamond Heart School. They do the best teaching about the inner critic that I've seen anywhere, much better than I've seen in any psychology. And the main idea is that the inner critic first develops when you're a young child, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And it's the first mechanism in a person's psyche which will stop them from doing something which is going to get them in trouble later, right? The inner critic is a recording of mom and dad's voices saying, no, bad, don't do that. And so as a little kid, maybe you're 3 years old and you have your crayons and you've been drawing on this piece of paper on the floor, and you look up at the living room wall and it's beautiful. It's completely open. There's no drawing on it. And you think, oh, this is going to be great. And you want to draw on the wall, right? And your critic stops you and goes, no, mom is going to be mad. Don't do this. This is a very important development in our psyches. It's the first intervention between impulse and action. So it's a good thing that we develop this. It's the first inner self-restraint. However, in the process of the structure of the ego developing, there's one more change that ideally happens, and that is that your inner critic separates from your central ego. And so you begin to be able to hear the voice, your own voice inside, instead of simply hearing the inner critic and thinking that's your voice. But that separation doesn't happen in most people. I don't know exact percentages, but I would guess 90-95% of the general population has never been able to make that separation. I certainly didn't do it until I was a student in the Diamond Heart School, and they have some really good teaching and exercises and ways to show you the difference between your own voice and your inner critic's voice, which is always devaluing. It's always basically an attack. How to recognize the inner critic's voice as different, and then how to take a stand against it. And I found that tremendously useful, and that's why I wanted to include it in that book. But I agree with you, like until a person is able to disidentify from their own inner critic, they think that voice in their head that's saying, bad boy, bad girl, you screwed up, you're stupid, nobody likes you. They think it's their own voice. And we hear that in the way they talk. People will say, I am hard on myself. What they mean is their inner critic is hard on them, but they're not distinguishing between their own voice and the voice of their inner critic. And part of my experience as a therapist for 40 years is that taking a client through the process of beginning to recognize the voice of the inner critic and then realize, oh, it's different. It's not really my voice. It's not my heart talking. It's not my essence. You know, a person's heart talks in terms of what they love, what they want to move towards, or maybe what they want to move away from, what they don't like. But it's about attraction and repulsion. It's about love. Whereas the inner critic is invariably judging and devaluing. It's always, you're not good enough, something's wrong with you, you're deficient, right?
Absolutely.
So being able to distinguish those and then to actively take a stand against it seems to me to be a really important step in anybody's inner work.
Yeah, because it really stops at the worst all the creative flow.
Yes.
And all the creativity. And it freezes person into a victim of, you know, themselves, and
Yeah.
it
does.
We have a question from our viewers, and they are saying, can we help our children to realize their inner critic?
Oh, sure. You can name it. I mean, one of the amazing things about human beings and language, no matter what language you're speaking, is that until you have a name for something, it's very hard to perceive it.
Yeah.
So one way to help a child, I mean, just in basic, when a child is having emotions, one helpful thing that a parent can do is reflect the name of that emotion. Like say, well, you look angry right now. Do you feel angry? And the kid will have to go inside and think, well, am I angry? What does angry feel like? I don't know. But helping the kid figure out what are emotions and how to label them is really helpful. And then take it one more step and help them begin to name, you know, well, is that what your heart is telling you? Or is that coming from your inner critic? Now, it's a little tricky if you're the mother or father or the main caretaker of this child, because the recorded voice in your child's head that is their inner critic is mostly a recording of your voice. And it's in your language, your dialect, with your intonation patterns. So it's a little bit like looking in a mirror to see this and to see, oh my God, they're doing to themselves exactly what I do to them.
Exactly.
And I feel a bit bad about doing that. But, you know, most parents can tell you that raising their children and seeing how their children treated themselves was a very sobering experience, that they would see, oh my God, my child is treating themselves exactly as badly as I treat them, and I am kind of embarrassed about that.
Well, that needs a lot of consciousness already that you're starting to see that.
Doesn't it?
Because most of the time, I don't think that people are aware. It's just like almost transgenerational. So it's like, you know, two survival patterns marry each other, and then they kind of like create a new survival pattern, and that just continues when it's all unconscious, and it's just like we think that we're just doing a good job here.
Yes, we do. We do pass on whatever we have been taught, because it's all we know. And we think it's the right way, the best way. I mean, mom and dad loved me, right? And they did this, so this must be the way to love my children. Yeah. I take it that you have learned about about this book from the printed copy, which you have. Because in the printed copies, I referred to them as survival strategies. And then the one big change that I made a few years later, after I had posted the ebooks, the electronic books, which you can change, you know, they only get printed on demand, is that I realized that a better term for that would be safety strategy instead of survival strategy. but I printed 10,000 copies initially.
Yeah. I actually have several of these, and I recommend this book to everybody, to all my friends, because the consciousness that this book holds, and the change that it can do in people's relationship when we become aware of how we are patterned, how we are conditioned, how we have found our safety strategy. So
yes, that's very important. And I'm working on a second book now on how to have better relationships, and that's about the same thing. It's a simpler way of looking at each pattern, but it focuses on, okay, if you don't do this pattern, but the other person you want to relate to does, here's a list of things you need to do that are different from what you normally do.
Okay.
Right?
So can you give us a little preview to this new book?
Sure. So if a person does the merging pattern, their habit is to want to connect heart to heart with other people, especially someone they love, their spouse or their child or whoever it is. And so they will send tendrils from their body. And maybe you guys can see, do these come out of their heart? Do they come out of their belly? I don't know. But they'll send some kind of little tendrils over to the other person's body and, poke in there and try to connect and like, well, what are you feeling? What's going on with you? How do we, do you love me? Do I love you? Of course I do. But do you love me? How do we connect here? So that's what they do naturally. If the other person also does merging pattern, they feel the tendrils and they respond. They go, yes, I love you. Everything's fine. Suppose, for instance, that this person is married to someone who does not do merging pattern, who instead does enduring pattern. Their childhood wound was invasion. They don't like being invaded. So let's say the wife does merging and the husband does enduring, just to try to be clear. So she loves him and she wants to feel closer, and she does the natural, habitual thing she always does to try to feel closer. She sends her little tendrils over, right? And he feels them coming in and it scares him. He doesn't like it. He backs up.
The worst thing you can do for an enduring pattern.
Exactly. He sends the energy down in his body. He starts to shut down. He starts to hide. He goes silent. And he gets kind of silently, quietly resentful, like, I don't want you doing that. He moves away. She is confused. She said, well, but I'm just trying to connect with you. I love you. She sends more tendrils, right? He feels more invaded. He moves away farther. This couple will land in my office for couples therapy. And they're both doing the best they can. They are managing the situation according to their own experience and their own unconscious beliefs that arise out of their own patterned awareness. But if they can each understand what's going on, they can change those behaviors. And I'm up on this one because the other day I was just working on the chapter for enduring pattern, and one of the first things is, okay, respect their space. Hey, all you people who send little tendrils over, you got to stop doing that. I know it will be hard and you will feel lonely, but you can only send your tendrils to the edge of their space. You cannot go into it. And by the way, the edge of their space is much farther out from their core than yours would be. It's not 1 meter, think 20 meters.
Absolutely. I think that we are assuming that people know all these personality patterns. I hear that there's a question from our beautiful audience. So could you run quickly through the 5 personality patterns and the reason why they are there, and what positives, negatives that you can briefly.
Sure. So, and there's more on this on my website called the 5personalitypatterns.com. There's a page on each pattern. So that might give people a deeper thing than I can say right here. But each pattern is based on a safety strategy, the 5 different safety strategies. And I've tried to check this out. Apparently, there really are only 5 options for a young child. So one option is leave, get out of here. You're overwhelmed, you don't like what's happening. Take your awareness away. Now, if you're an infant lying, on the table while they're changing your diaper, you can't run away. You can't even walk yet, but you can take your awareness away. You can take your attention away. So the first option is leaving. The second one is the opposite of leaving. It's going toward the person, even though maybe they're the source of your upset, trying to merge with them, trying to connect with them, and then trying to get them to solve the problem for you. And this is what we all do as infants. We are unhappy in some way. We're too hot or too cold or hungry or tired or upset, or we've got gas pains or something. And what do? We cry. Our crying is a way to try to get someone's attention to come and solve it for us. And that's a very natural and organic and, the best thing we can do at the moment. So connect and try to get them to help you as number 2, the merging strategy. Number 3 is for, there's kind of a dividing line between the first 2 and the last 3. And that dividing line is that will and strength begin to come online in the child. We're talking 18 months to 24 months here. And before 18 months, when leading pattern and merging pattern typically arise, you don't have much in the way of will and strength. You don't even have a sense of a separate self, maybe. But starting 2 years old, 3 years old, you do have some strength. You are up on your feet. You're a toddler. You can walk, you can move, and you can try to get what you want. So your experience changes from, I'm overwhelmed, you fix it, to I want that. I want to get that. I want to go in that direction. And you start doing what you want to do naturally. Now, your parents have a responsibility to teach you manners and to keep you safe. And that might include, well, I can't let you wander in that direction because there's a stairway going down and you'll fall down the stairs and that you'll get hurt, and we don't want that. So they pick you up and they turn you around. Now, if you're maybe only 18 months old, when they pick you up and turn you around, you just go in the new direction because you were just going somewhere, it didn't matter where. It's like, just move. There was not an I and a will and I'm going there. But if you're 3 and they pick you up and turn you around, you turn back. You go, no, I was going there and I don't like you messing with me. Right? So then you get, well, that's the origin of the terrible twos in raising a kid, that the ability to say no and to have their own preference about what they do has just come online, and so they get into saying no. So that there's a kind of a constant fight between the parent and the kid over what are you going to do? What are we going to do? And I'm not going to let you hurt yourself, or I want you to do what I want you to do. And the kid's position is, I want to do my way, just because it's my way and I like my way. And so 2 possibilities arise. One is the kid is able to win most of those fights, and the other is the kid loses most of those fights. So enduring pattern arises out of the situation where the kid loses most of them, especially if the parents are really cruel and even vengeful about crushing the kid's will. And if you look back in history, the books for parents, we have books back into the 1700s up to 1950-ish. They all said, Your job as a parent is to crush your child's will, to
Absolutely.
teach it to obey.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for enduring pattern, but it's also a recipe for keeping your kids safe when they're going to be a slave in somebody else's,
Yeah.
society. They don't have any power, and the only way to survive is obey.
Mm.
So the kid who can't win any of these battles will decide, okay, I can't win, but I can avoid really losing. And the way to avoid losing is I'm not going to play the game. I am not going to try to accomplish anything. I'm not going to try to express myself. I'm just going to drop out. That's the bringing the energy down in your body, going down into the earth, hiding, and becoming silent and the immovable object. So that's enduring pattern. The opposite, if the kid has a big energy flow, they can bring the energy up and they can fight like hell, And often the kid has more energy than the parent, and they can win a lot of fights. And it's not just the parent-child situation, it includes brothers and sisters, the culture, the language, the ethnicity, all the background factors. And maybe the spirit coming in has a plan about which patterns it wants to develop. I don't know how to sort all that out, but for some reason, some people decide, okay, I'm just going to get bigger and I'm going to dominate you. And they do their best to do that. They develop the aggressive pattern. Keeping in mind, everybody develops two, not just one, but we're talking about them as singles to make it simpler. And then the fifth option is, instead of trying not to lose or trying to win, you could just follow the rules. You could not pay attention to your own core and your own heart and what do you feel and what do you want. Instead, you could just really learn mom and dad's rules and be a good boy or a good girl. Be a good kid and do what they want you to do. So your attention leaves yourself and goes out to all the rules and structures and the good manners and all that stuff you're taught. And you become a good child. So those are the five. Leaving pattern, get out of here. Merging pattern, connect. Enduring pattern, pull in and go down and hide. Aggressive pattern, come up and fight, try to dominate them. And the rigid pattern, like, be good, be correct, have, use the correct grammar and the correct pronunciation and spell things well. And, always wear clean clothes and have your hair combed and your teeth brushed and, mom and dad praise you. So I hope that's helpful as a quick summary of the five.
It's very beautiful and very understandable. And do you have any favorite for yourself?
Well, I, of course, have my own patterns that I go into, but I don't think that any of these patterns are actually better than or worse than any others. Mm. As far as I can tell, they each have their own pros and cons. They each teach you a specific set of skills, which are very useful skills. So I don't see any pattern as like more important or more to be preferred over any other. Well,
and Barbara, you mentioned that your spirit may also have a part in what pattern you use. And Barbara used always to say this pattern probably comes from a past life where that wounding was happening. And we can see what is your opinion about that? Do we carry our patterns in our souls?
I'm not able to perceive past lives.
Yeah.
So I don't have any data on which to have an informed opinion about that. Yeah. I can see it as a real possibility, but I don't have any way to know what's true and what's not on that.
Okay.
There is, I think, relating to this conversation that we had about the merging pattern, there is a question, it's like, how can parents develop a gentle solution to the merging pattern?
Well, the merging pattern involves trying to stay the baby, right, to get the other person to help you and solve it. So when we phrase it as a solution to the pattern, I guess I think of it differently. I think of a person's job is not to solve their patterns, but to learn the difference between being in pattern and being present, and learn how to shift their awareness more towards being present, how to come out of pattern. And that involves learning a lot of the energetic skills that you teach in your school and that I wrote about in the book. But also just beginning with recognizing, oh, wait a minute, when I'm in that way of seeing the world, I'm actually stuck in a personality pattern and I'm not present anymore. In a way, I'm in the past, trying to handle problems from the past, and I'm missing the present experience. And I need to come back to being present.
Absolutely.
Does that answer your question?
It was a question from the audience, and,
okay.
for me, it answers it. And I know that I don't know, is there still time for a couple of questions? There's also a question about how the personality patterns have developed over years. They have been developed over years and they are ingrained in our DNA. So what are some ways to change our behavior from reaction to responding?
Yeah, as I understand it, these patterns do not affect a person's DNA. The person who asked that may be speaking metaphorically. I don't think it actually affects DNA in the sense that it then can be passed down to a child. Or passed down through the DNA. It can certainly be passed down in training and behavior. The patterns do get deeply conditioned into a person's body, and part of how they get conditioned is not just affecting the shape of the body, but as you guys know very well, distorting the flow of energy and creating chronic muscle contractions and all sorts of problems. As far as I can tell, the getting out of pattern requires understanding the patterns and understanding which patterns you do, and then beginning to learn the skills you need to get out of those patterns, but also finding the core wounds that caused you to adopt those patterns in the first place and healing those core wounds. And we now have in energy healing and energy psychology a whole slew of different healing tools, which I think is really great, and I hope it'll really change the possibilities for healing in the future.
I totally agree with you, and how beautiful it's how meaningful it's every time that you go and touch the original pain that comes from that original wound, and how it changes your presence in yourself every time that happens. And yeah, we're getting towards an hour of conversation here, and I think that probably it's going to be. Do you have any other question, or Titta?
I mean, I could keep Steven here for a couple of hours, and we could. I do have one maybe that I would love to hear you explain, which is the self-referencing.
Oh yeah.
Which I think is very important, and in terms of like people who don't know what that even means, and in terms of because we take so much influence from the outside and we define ourselves so much from outside,
Yes.
without realizing that we do it. And you know, in this way of starting to heal oneself, to be aligned with oneself and with one's own integrity, I think the first step is starting to understand that, you know, what is self-referencing, and you have done an amazing work about it. So will you explain a little bit what that is?
This is actually from some teaching I received. Most things in the book are teaching that I received. I've been very fortunate in the teachers I've had. But in general, I would say that there are three main ways that we learn to reference. One is referencing ourself. What's going on in me? What do I feel? What do I want? What do I need? A second way is referencing other people, that is referencing their core instead of my own core, and feeling them, like what do they feel? What do they need? Who do they want me to be? That's more typically the merging patterns main skill.
Yeah.
And then the third main thing people will reference is some outside set of rules and structures, the stuff that a person caught in rigid pattern is mainly referencing. All three of these skills are very important skills and are needed to actually be a healthy, functioning adult. You need to be able to reference yourself and reference other people, maybe not with the same skill as someone who can actually feel their inner experience, but actually ask them, like, well, what do you think about this? What do you feel about it? What do you want? And of course, we all need to reference the external rules. You know, it's not okay to drive twice as fast as the speed limit on any street anywhere. It's not safe. You have to know the speed limit. You have to respect the speed limit. So there are lots of rules and forms that are handed to us by our culture that are useful and important. So I think it's very important for a person to learn to reference in all three of these ways, and they probably are good at one of them already. So hooray for that. Good for you. You're good at one of them. Now it's time to start learning the other two. And for any person who has not developed a felt sense of core and learned to reference themselves, it's going to be very important that they do that they practice, and it may take quite a while, but to actually become able to feel, okay, what does my body want in that? And the place in the body that we feel most clearly and where we, in a way, locate ourselves is the core. You can imagine it as a column from the crown of your head all the way down to the bottom of your torso, to your perineum. And that in that column is where you feel, that's where you get the answers to what do I want? Who do I love? What's important to me? Do I want to take this job? All that kind of stuff.
Your personal truth.
Your personal truth, exactly. Exactly. So I think learning all three of those is really important for everybody. And unfortunately, most of us are good at maybe one of them or maybe two of them, but not all three. So we need to practice and learn whatever we're not good at yet.
Yeah. Some good self-development to reference
Yeah.
it from. Yeah. So maybe we have one more question here. There is one coming question, curious recommendations for resources related to treatment of patterns in therapeutic or healing context.
You know, I think Barbara Brennan's books are terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly, I hope people can reference my book and find it accessible and useful. There are not a lot of books out there on the character structure patterns, the personality patterns, which are easy to understand. you know, Wilhelm Reich's original learning, and he did begin publishing about this back in the 1930s. So this has been developing in kind of the secret backwaters of psychology and energy healing for a long, long time. Reich's stuff is kind of difficult to understand. Lowen's bioenergetics is another approach to it, a little more accessible. Then there's Pirakos's core energetics. There's Stephen Johnson's books on one of them I think is called The Hard Work Transformation. But there aren't that many books.
Mm-hmm.
But it's becoming more well known, and I hope there will be many more.
No,
Lots
absolutely.
more live teaching.
Absolutely. And we totally agree with that, because there was the world of science and psychology and psychotherapy, and then there is energy. And what you so brilliantly do is that you put them together. And from our perspective, we really believe that is really the way to health. So there is maybe one last question is about this, like, you know, when you heal a pattern, does your body heal as well?
Part way. I have not known of any situations where a person who was deeply conditioned into a pattern is able to completely free themselves from that conditioning and the holding structures in the body, you know, the fascia stuck to itself. I think we can all make progress. We can come at least partly out of pattern. We can learn to wear our patterns more lightly. We can become able to be more present more of the time. But it seems to me that for pretty much everybody, if things get bad enough, if we get overwhelmed enough, we're probably going to resort to some safety strategies. And probably those are going to be our original favorite ones, because those are the ones we're best at. We have a long history of those being the best options available. So I don't know that, I don't think of it as a black and white either or choice. I don't know of anybody being able to come completely out of every pattern and not be subject to any of that anymore.
And that's why we actually recommend to do both, because the work that we are doing in the remote healings and in our personal work with the clients, whether it is in physical contact on hands-on healing or whether it's remote, that can support amazingly the healing process and working on a talk therapy together with that.
Yeah, there's psychological work, there's body work, there's energetic work. All of them are very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I just like to mention here that how in my personal experience, because we go working with these patterns a lot in our training at school, is and how they are coming back to us in moments in life when we are feeling overwhelmed or there is something that is not working. And oh, I thought that I worked with this pattern a lot before, you know, even I had that really dive into the wound that time, and that pattern comes back, but it's always different. It's like we have worked there already. So there is I would say a more capable way of being present with it, which
Yes.
allows more healing, I would say, into that pattern. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
And there are realms of experience that a person who does a different pattern that we don't do, that other person will have experience in perceiving the world differently. They will have experience of the world and maybe even of other dimensions that we just don't have.
Yeah.
So I don't know that anyone is able to get the whole experience. I think it would be great. I would love that, but I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, I think we're here to have our own unique experience. That feels about right to me.
And I think it's very important to remember that just because I'm experiencing the world my way and the way I always have, that doesn't make it the right way or the one way or the only way, and it doesn't make someone else's way wrong.
Absolutely.
It's helpful if I become a little curious about, so, well, how's your experience different? And how do you get to that? And can you lead me there somehow?
Absolutely. To deep understanding, from hurt to hurt into heart to heart.
There you go. Well said.
Well, that's kind of like my workshop's name.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a brand. Good for you. From hurt to hurt to heart to heart. That's great. And we see a lot of people in the world relating from hurt to hurt.
Unfortunately.
That makes for cruelty and violence.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, it has been amazing talking with you, Steven. Absolutely amazing. I think that we have, for all of you who are listening here tonight or this morning, depending where you are, we are inviting you to join us for a healing at the Universal Healing. We have tomorrow a healing, Manel, don't we? On the D.
Yeah, we have the tomorrow in our Universal Healing. Thank you very much, Steven.
Oh, it's a pleasure to meet both of you. It really is.
Yeah, we could keep talking for hours.
Oh, for hours.
But it's really beautiful to be with you and talking about a theme that is really interesting for us and for our clients and students. So,
and what's the healing you're doing tomorrow?
Tomorrow we're in Universal Healing, we always focus our healing energy into one theme. So like we do group healing, and a group of healers, we get together and to perform a healing that a bigger group of clients, they are going to receive. What we do to help our focus in the healing as well is to choose a theme that we align and we focus on it. And tomorrow, I mean, we use from all the body systems, like next Wednesday, we're going to work with the lymphatic system. But tomorrow, we're going to do a new healing that we've never done before, and it's healing the DNA. So our focus will go into the DNA of our participants. And what we like to offer today with this interview, it's that you can go to our website if you are new with Universal Healing and subscribe in our website, and then you can send us a message with Steven Kessler 5P, and we're going to invite you to participate without paying anything. Even though our healings, they are very cheap. It's a new way to do it. We want to really make energy healing accessible to everyone and make it more mainstream that it's been until now. And this is the way that it's working very well. And we are enjoying so much doing, all of us, all the healers, and we are receiving very beautiful feedback from our participants.
That's great. And I completely agree with you that the next task in this process is finding ways to scale up the healing process and the education process to many, many more people. Yeah. So it's, psychotherapy used to be the luxury of the wealthy. And, we're gradually getting it out to more people, but everybody needs this, especially people who don't have a lot of money.
Absolutely. So the well-being, so that the well-being can be really at the hands of everybody who is wanting to feel well.
So
good.
So yeah,
I will join you tomorrow.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh yeah. I will be a client in the background, just
Yeah,
So
yeah.
good.
No, it's great. It's a healing that to make it even more accessible, there is no need to join anything, or you just book the healing and that's it. You're gonna be you're gonna be if you know what time it is, the healing for you. Then if you like, you go into your bed or whatever in a space that you like and open.
Oh, I see.
To receive. The healing will happen even if you are working, because we do different times and all that. You're going to receive the healing, but it's beautiful.
Okay.
In my perception, it's always beautiful when you take a moment for yourself and you feel that the healing is coming to you. I love that in a personal way. So I'm doing more healings than receiving. I have to say that too. But when I do receive, I love it. And but yeah, join us for sure if you like. We're going to be very
That's
happy.
great.
And all of you who are,
I'm still kind of caught in the old idea of you have to like physically be present or join someone, or at least, call them on the phone or something. And you're more in the energy world of, no, it'll get to you.
Yeah.
Time and space is not that important.
it is not. It's just a question of the mind. We can receive it with the set of intention.
That's great. Hooray for you.
So you're welcome, Steven, and all of you wonderful people who are there listening to us. Please come and join us tomorrow for the DNA healing. I think it is at 11 o'clock.
No, tomorrow it's 8 p.m. East New York time. And
That's right.
that is 5, I think, Pacific time, isn't it?
5 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah. So
and late at night for Europe.
Yes,
And morning for Australia.
Yeah. Look, the truth is that we're having people from all over the world, and some people we like to receive the feedback from our participants, and some people they say, look, the healing was happening at 2 a.m. I was sleeping and I woke up. I mean, we don't want to wake you up.
Yeah.
But sometimes it and I felt it, and now I'm feeling this way, this other way. So it's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
It's
and
really
maybe being
amazing.
asleep is a good way to receive.
Yeah,
absolutely. So your mind is not on the way of allowing the healing to happen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Titta. It's a pleasure to meet you.
It's really a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much.
so thank you again, and we're going to finish this conversation right now.
Thank you, Manel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you for joining.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.